LGBTQ people do not find much of a support. Even the discrimination policies are not clear. Yeah, after an IISER judgment, I didn't face any problems really.
Hi, welcome to SciTalk. Today we have with us Professor Mani from Homi Bhaba Centre for Science Education, TIFR, Mumbai. Today she is going to talk to us about her work and her life as a mathematician. Welcome, Professor Mani.
Thanks.
Could you please tell us a bit about your research and give us sort of an elevator pitch to your work that you do?
Currently, I work in rough sets, which is a formal approach to vagueness, and the subject involves plenty of mathematics, logic, philosophy, especially philosophy of vagueness, and even computation, sometimes even engineering, and there are many applications too, so it's really a broad field. But I work mainly in the foundations of the subject. My work is mainly about algebraic semantics. I work on related mereology. Mereology is, of course, the theory of parts and wholes. That is very relevant in rough sets.
So for the general audience, could you please elaborate on rough sets and the mathematics of vagueness?
I suppose when you're trying to perceive something, then what you have to do is you'll have to classify first, otherwise you won't be able to perceive anything much. And this operation, according to people like Gibson, is that Gibson in fact views that equivalences are involved in generating perception. And equivalent solutions can be naturally associated with approximations at a higher level. So the classes are things which are definite relative to an equivalence class. And approximations are constructed as collections of those classes. So when you see something vague, you try to approximate it. And that's one of the starting points. And rough sets actually did not originate in this way from the perception or cognition point of view. It originated from databases, in fact. There is the problem of dimensionality, which is that if you are having too many attributes, then one of the problems with databases is to reduce the number of attributes without losing much as far as the quality of information is concerned. And so that helps, for example, in medical diagnostics. You want a minimum number of symptoms from which you can say that the person definitely has a disease, for example.
Just a quick question as a follow-up. So we've heard news of research going on where people use deep learning approaches on patient samples, on patient tissues, cancer tissues, to sort of identify symptoms or to classify them as cancerous or non-cancerous. So is this something where...
It is not exactly related. The problem with deep learning is that one doesn't know what exactly is happening. You don't know the actual reasoning that is happening. What happens is we just feed some training data and then we get some output. And the machine seems to be learning. Basically what is happening is one is correctly feeding a function, a very complicated kind of function in deep learning. And we don't know what exactly has been fed. That's the main problem. So there they lose heavily on the reasoning part, which is one big issue with deep learning. And that's why hybrid methods are those that combine multiple approaches. So those have been attempted.
What was your academic trajectory, starting from school and so on and so forth, and how did you get interested in mathematics and end up being in academia or chose to continue in academia, and that too particularly in the fields of algebraic logic, mathematics of vagueness, and rough sets?
It's really a long journey. I was quite good in science, right from class, from primary school itself. So, in fact, I got most of my merit cards in science-related subjects. My teachers were quite encouraging too. And I didn't like my first language, which was Tamil actually. So, that subject I really hated for a long time. I was doing quite well in school, right up to middle school. Then I had plenty of depression and all during those times. After that, I did my graduation in mathematics. It was MPC actually, and I also did a postgraduate course in statistics. And after that itself, I almost jumped into research. The main reason for jumping that way was probably I was in IISER. There I had access to research papers, and even my project there was quite interesting. I was also part of the Mathematical Society, the Calcutta Mathematical Society. I think I became a member when I was quite young. Almost after my graduation itself, I was with the Mathematical Society. Actually, even before having my master's degree, I had published over 200 pages in top top journals in rough sets and also algebra. And then I did my PhD from Calcutta University. But during all this time, I've been publishing a lot. So, the axiomatic approach to granular computing was developed in say 2012 or so. That was quite major, but I had already done plenty of algebraic logics and semantics associated with rough sets by that time. So I became a senior member of the International Rough Set Society at that time. That was before having my PhD. Yeah, in parallel, I have also been involved in things like course development work, and also I'm also an R expert. I used to do consultancy on regression modeling. That was initially for a hedge fund company.
Which one did you enjoy more, or they were both equally enjoyable for you?
Which one?
The consultancy regarding soft computing or your research in rough
I was
sets?
more interested in research. Consultancy was basically a part-time thing. So I never worked full-time at all during those times. I also joined HBCSE more recently. This was mainly for applying rough sets in the context of education research.
So presently at HBCSE, you're trying to develop courses for mathematics education.
No, I'm not developing courses proper. I'm teaching a course there. That is for a number of students and faculty actually. And I'm trying to bring rough sets into education research, so that it can be applied more easily. But in India, we don't have much in education research. There's very little funding, and so one has to take an extra initiative to get things done. And so there, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to apply. In fact, I have one recent paper on using rough sets in the context of concept modeling, concept inventories. So a concept inventory is basically some kind of test which is used to access whether students understand something or not.
Okay.
So it is generally very focused. It will look like an MCQ with some additional explanations, but actually developing it involves a lot more work because it has to be structured really, and so it is also usable with rough sets. And I have improved that I have introduced something called rough concept inventories.
So do you think the rough concept inventories can be extrapolated to other fields in STEM, biology and other things. And could you tell us more about how, or give us examples on how can...
Concept inventories are used in almost all fields, all parts of STEM. Can have concept inventories in mathematics, statistics, then even say simply for studying rotational kinematics. Do people understand rotational kinematics? Originally it was developed for physics only. In physics there was something called force concept inventories, and that became very popular and it got duplicated in other fields, and that's how the subject has grown.
So when you invoke concepts like vagueness and mathematics together, and sort of have a philosophical take on mathematics, and you've also worked on mathematics and philosophy. So would you like to tell us more about that body of work?
Philosophy is actually involved everywhere, and especially when one has to handle vagueness, one has to really rethink assumptions or relook one's basic assumptions about anything. So, and with vagueness we have number of paradoxes also associated. So when one wants to represent knowledge and reason logically about things, then all this philosophy naturally gets involved. And philosophy of vagueness is of course a very old branch.
Also on your web page, we came across a very interesting way of explaining gender, a mathematical expression to define gender. So would you like to tell us more about it?
Gender, yeah. I think I defined both sex and gender there. So, yeah, sex of course one can see it as a collection of things. That's the modern understanding. So we have things, for defining sex one has to look at number of things. Whether that all that is related to gender is more complicated, because the first question would be, what is gender? Gender of course should be seen as it's comprised of things like gender expression, gender identity, and gender as a social construct. Gender identity of course is generally recognized to be intrinsic to the person in question. So, and there's plenty of research which says that gender identity is almost, it can be predicted with various parameters essentially. If one has a full birth history, then one can easily predict somebody's gender identity. So in that sense it is quite intrinsic. In the lab, if you want to produce say trans guinea pigs, you can always do that. It's very easy. This was known even in the 60s, but the experiment was not recognized as such initially. It took quite a long time to understand what had happened. So, that's about gender identity, and there are plenty of papers, and there used to be plenty debates also. Now people work more in the lab rather than, though some people do like to debate, but it has become more of a lab matter. Yeah, and otherwise of course we just define gender identity as what one thinks one's gender is.
You've been very vocal about your own experiences as a trans woman in academia, and so what I would want to know is what has been your personal experience in terms of a support system in academia for the people of LGBTQ community.
Yeah, I think it's quite difficult in academia, because there's an older generation who grew up without much knowledge about all these things, and they generally take time to get adjusted. And you do find a few bigots too, but but most people generally take some time to get adjusted to all these things. That is one aspect. So, which is why one really has to communicate. It's very important to speak about gender in more channels and popularize things. These things are really important. In general, LGBTQ people do not find much of a support. Only recently, due to plenty of activism, certain steps have been taken. Like even the discrimination policies are not clear. Then at least some trans people will have special needs and all. And also some LGBTQ people may have special needs. Like, some may want gender neutral toilets and such things. Now, because not everybody not all LGBTQ people identify on the binary. So for them, some of them are very vocal about gender neutral toilets and such things. In fact, at one of the juridical institutes in Kolkata, they actually have put up gender neutral toilets recently because of activism. And otherwise, support system is it has obviously improved after 2014 due to after the Nalsa judgment. That was really good judgment in which the judges could actually see the issues. It was a sensitive judgment. The original petitions were really good also. Because of that, the judgment came out quite well. Yeah, after Nalsa judgment, I didn't face any problems really. Because I had to change my documents and all at Calcutta University. So this was not a problem at all. They almost did it immediately. But apart from that, there are other issues like discrimination and all this. And for that, there is not much support as it. In fact, there is no positive discrimination done for the entire LGBTQ community, which is a bit odd because they can always get discriminated and nobody is going to explicitly say that they are discriminated.
Such kind of discrimination could come either from a collective point where it can be from administration or from a source of hierarchy, but it also sometimes comes from your peer group. So what are your thoughts about these two different kinds of discriminations?
It can happen and it has happened. And that is a problem which so one has to be really vocal and try to teach the basics to people. But apart from that, there should be more effort on part of the system too, which is important. And without that, it gets quite complicated.
Do you have suggestions for administrations, for institutes to make a more welcoming environment?
For making a more welcoming environment, there are plenty of suggestions, in fact, by a number of groups. In fact, there are many LGBTQ groups in all over the country. Like there's Sappho for Equality in Kolkata. Then there's Orinam.net. It's a big group in the south. There are many others, in fact. There are groups in Kerala, Mumbai, everywhere. And people, and they do suggest plenty of methods of making how to develop, how to build a welcoming environment, and also policies. And even the harassment policies, they haven't been updated in a number of places, which is a big problem.
So at IISER Pune, we are currently in the process of making an LGBTQ friendly club by the students. It's being called Satrangi. And so if you have suggestions that what should they sort of try to incorporate in their day-to-day working, and also one of the goals is to help allies as well, not just the people who identify themselves as belonging to the LGBTQ community, but also people who want to know more. So,
Yeah,
what are
that
some
is-
things that can be done?
Yeah, I think you should have a website, you should put in a lot of material. Yeah, you should put plenty of related material, even the definition should be there. That is essential. People don't understand definitions also. So then you should give examples and how to build a welcoming environment, and also explain things about discrimination, and also address special needs, which is important. Apart from that, yeah, developing awareness is very important. So that can also be an additional focus, because if you want to especially meet with allies and all, it's needed. And sensitization programs, I think, should be done almost, say, every 3 months or every 2 months, something like that. Should select the optimal time, so that you can really cover most of the people.
So, in your experience, having sensitization programs, by the institute or the administration versus B, having it from the students or peers or colleagues, which one helps better in sensitizing people? Because eventually that remains the goal.
Yeah, it can be either way. It's
Okay.
not a big thing. Yeah, if it is, yes, if the administration is also involved, it's good.
Do you think that women are at an even more disadvantaged position because of intersectionality in Indian academia context? Anyway,
Yeah.
we are doing so bad on diversity,
Yeah.
despite regular instructions from hierarchy that we should have
Yeah.
more people from more diverse backgrounds. We should not discriminate, but it still perpetuates.
Yeah, it still perpetuates, and yeah, even when women do well, they are not recognized properly. That problem is there. And there are some people who will live in complete denial. That kind of academics do exist. And that's a big problem. Yeah, one has to study the problem from intersectional, or one can use other perspectives also, which I would think, say, even Marxist feminism works fine in this situation.
So, for situations like this, again, certain things have to be done by external factors, administration, colleagues, so on and so forth. But then it also has to come from women within.
Yeah,
Right?
that is
So,
true.
do you have advice for females in academia?
Yeah,
Or
I do have plenty of advice, in
Yes.
fact. In fact, this is studied heavily. Even there are a number of websites which have come up recently. In fact, those are feminist websites which give plenty of advice to women.
So, other than your research in mathematics, philosophy, about soft computing and other things, you've also published research on gender studies. So, can you briefly elaborate on the work that you've done?
As far as gender studies is concerned, yeah, I worked on quite a few problems. In one particular study, I dealt with the statistical aspect or analysis of the data. This was about access to medical services by trans women in Kolkata. It was actually transgender people, but most of the participants were trans women in that. So I handled the data for this whole study. And I had to interpret, of course, so I had a strong influence on the whole thing eventually. And this is one thing which I looked into. Then I also worked on the quality of life of lesbians. So this is one study in India in general. So I tried to study this. It was quite tough because there are no historical studies available. As far as definitions of gender and these things are concerned, I've also tried to use rough sets there. So this is there in one of my papers on rough sets. So it's an example. So on that also I have done quite a bit. So it becomes, so one can define gender in a more proper way. Yeah, I did deal with mental health issues of LTQ women in India. So yeah, in academia too. So this topic, yeah, I have a recent article on this, and I even got the Orange Flower Award for that. And yeah, that's an interesting article.
Can you tell us more about that then?
Yeah, it was about the mental health issues that LTQ women may face. It actually, many of the issues are quite common to other women too. Because plenty of women face, anybody facing discrimination will face various mental health issues also. So, and how to deal with them. So this is what the article is basically about.
So, finally, if you were to make a manifesto for women in science, what would that look like?
Yeah, the first thing is I would like women to recognize plurality. That is very important. They should try to foster a number of approaches in any scientific discipline. That is one thing. And of course, they should have various rights which are well known and which have been described in feminist practices. That is that is not one aspect, that is a number of aspects. I am not listing them out. They should also strive for their rights, that is very important. And yeah, they should really ask for pay for everything, pay in the sense of, in more senses than it's recognized. Even say housework is completely not considered work at all. That is a big problem. So if somebody is in housework, they should be recognized as much as anybody else is. That is important. And of course, they have to bring feminism to all aspects of life. That is important. Not just in one or two areas and forget about everything else. For example, religion comes with a lot of patriarchy. They should try to either discard religion or rethink it. So it's up to them. I'm not saying that one should totally throw out religion, but it's always a good idea to. And that will, of course, automatically remove a huge load of patriarchal labor that they perform for free. And that should be part of any manifesto. Because it's so heavily intense, this kind of things also comes in. And that's about it, at least.
That's a very interesting and useful take, and I'm sure a lot of people will not just get inspired, but also try to educate others about what you've said today. So thank you, Professor Mani, for joining us today for SciTalk.
Thanks a lot.